Salman.
Nice to be with you again, Rabbi.
Good to be with you again.
Thanks for taking the time to learn with me.
It's a pleasure. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. It's exciting to be learning this Mimer that is, in honor of Yud Shvat, the anniversary of the previous Rebbe's passing, and the beginning of the Rebbe's leadership. And it's a very special series of Mamarim discourses, and this one is from 1961. That kind of corresponds to this year's Mimer. We can get into that later.
Okay, yeah, please. So, what I know a little bit about Basi Legani, it's one of the famous verses from Song of Songs, and that it was kind of transformed into a discourse by the previous Rebbe in honor of his mother-in-law or someone passing away. But my sources are kind of scattered. I'd love to hear really, from you, what is Basi Legani? What is this discourse? Why did the previous Rebbe kind of utilize it and create this powerful discourse that, as you just said, has been used this time of the year? It took 20 years to finish because they would do one chapter a year, and we're on the third or fourth cycle.
Right. So let me say maybe a quick word first about this term that we're using, discourse, Mimer. You know what it is, but for anybody who's going to be listening, in our Havrusa, our joint study session, a Mimer is a very deep discourse of Chassidic teaching that's based in Kabbalah mostly, but it's of course based on verses in Torah. This particular one, Basi Legani, I have come to my garden, is based on a verse in Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs, and together with a comment from the Midrash, which is writings from our sages that go back 1,500 years or more, that explains this verse. And then came the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchok, and he wrote a deep discourse, 20 chapters on this title, Basi Legani, I've come to my garden. We're studying a next generation of this discourse, one that our Rebbe, Rabbi MM Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, taught on one of the chapters of this discourse. So like you said, every year he would explain one of the chapters. This year we are studying the one where he explained the 11th chapter in depth. And he did this for 20 years, and then another cycle. And now, many years later, we're continuing. Chassidim have the custom of continuing this practice of studying, kind of start the cycle over and the discourse for that year. So today, for this year coming up, it would be the 11th chapter, and the.
So it goes. It's a cool kind of tradition that you do one chapter each year. But what's the real kind of intention that they created for? Because I know in Hasidus it always ends with some kind of practical application.
Yeah.
So when the Rebbe's were giving this course, was it to illuminate something about, like you said, the Midrash on Basi Legani, or?
So what's the intention in it? Ultimately, in Hasidus especially, the intention is that it should lead to influence in our lives. It should enhance our lives, our relationship with God. It should illuminate our lives. It should give us insight and strength in overcoming any challenges that we face. Yeah. So that's the ultimate intention in the Mimer. As we'll see, this particular series focuses really on the most fundamental idea in life, which is basically, why are we here globally? What's the cosmic picture? How does it affect us as individuals, and how do we achieve it? So it's probably the most important discussion that we can possibly have.
It's cool. It's something we hear especially often nowadays. Your role in life, your purpose in life. It's cool how it's, especially the Rebbe's would take they would create a discourse based on something in the Torah, like Basi Legani, and turn that or illuminate from that this lesson, which it kind of adds more kind of emphasis or light to it. It's just when, at least for myself, when I come across, Basi Legani, Achati Kala, I've come to my garden, my sister, my bride, different things I can pick up what exactly it means, but how to turn that into how we each have a role and purpose is very fascinating.
Yeah.
So perhaps we should dive into it.
We should dive into it. Yeah, let's get right into it. And I just had one more point related to the last thing you said, that what's amazing here is that we're starting from a small quote from a verse of Torah, and then it's expanded and through the Midrash and through the teachings of Chassidus, and it only highlights the concept that Torah is infinite wisdom, it's divine wisdom, and that's why you can mine it for such depth, because even though it seems like just a few words, but it's really like a key to a big topic of knowledge.
It's not something that would be like, taken out of context.
No,
I think this can be used anywhere.
Well, a person could try to do that, but this is when you're relying on the teachings of a great Rebbe. This is the idea of going into it, like kind of opening it up, like the way scientists look inside of an atom and see so much power. You go into a word of Torah and you can see so much depth, and it leads to new chambers, new openings. I'm gonna make a bracha to start. I know you did your bracha already, so Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvarei. Amen. All right.
Let's get to it.
Yeah, so we're gonna read the Hebrew, translate, and discuss. Right? The way we usually do it. Basi Legani achaisi kala. I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. This is the quote from Shir Hashirim, from Song of Songs, and then the Midrash comments on it and says that the word Legani is really, has a deeper meaning. My garden, Lignuni, my special place, my special private place, which is translated like as a bridal chamber. Okay, Lamakim Shahya Ikri Batchila, the place where my essence was first found. So I was first there. I came back to the place where my essence was. God is saying, the Ikar Shechina Batachtainim Haisa, that the main aspect of the Shechina, which means the divine presence, was below, was in the world here below, versus, as opposed to, let's say, in heavens above. Often people think of God, they think of God being far away on a heavenly level only. But the Torah tells us, and this verse is telling us, that the Shechina was originally below at the beginning of creation. And when God is saying, I came back to my garden, this verse is related to, according to our sages, to the construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the holy temple that was in the desert, that God is coming back to my garden, back to my place, back to my special private chamber, so to speak.
Back because it was after the destruction, you said?
Not because after the destruction, because the first time God was there was with creation, with Adam and Eve, before they sinned. So as we know, God was kind of revealed with them in the Garden of Eden, and godliness was in a very revealed state. And then, as we're going to learn...
So the Midrash is what said, back to my garden. Or like, because it's commenting on Basi Legani, I have come to my garden.
Exactly.
So the Midrash is kind of, the Midrash is commenting on Song of Songs. So what's the kind of timeline?
So the Midrash, the Midrash is Song of Songs, according to Jewish tradition. This is authored by King Solomon, your namesake. You have a special connection to him. And a lot of, several books of Torah, of Tanakh are attributed to King Solomon. And in this, so that's Song of Songs. And then Midrash.
What time line is that?
So this is King Solomon is, let's say, if you're counting, let's say from after Mount Sinai is like 3,300 plus years ago. This is, it was, I think 400 years or something after that. Can check that number, but so let's say we're talking, I don't know, rough estimate, more like 2,800 years ago or something like that.
And the Midrash after...
Midrash is interesting. Midrash is Jewish sages' oral teachings and commentary on Torah that really go back a long way. They're an oral tradition, and like the Talmud and the Mishnah, and even the Zohar, these were very old teachings that first existed in a oral form, teachers to students, and then after many years, centuries upon centuries later, they were eventually written down in books and compiled. So the compilations probably go back to 1,500 years ago, or
so
sometime
it's still about
around
1,000.
that.
The
Yeah,
Midrash is still about 1,000 or more years after King Solomon.
Yes, but that's when it was written down.
Yeah.
As opposed to when the ideas in the Midrash may have been, talked from rabbi to student to say, sages discussed for hundreds of years before that until they were finally written down in this book. And a lot of what we study in Judaism is really everything we study through that lens. We have the written Torah, and then we have the oral commentary and explanation, which is called the oral Torah, that has been passed on through the years, and that gives us the deeper insight. So that's the background.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but the Mimer is basically an opening to get into a topic.
Yeah.
It starts with those words, but it leads you into something, to a whole, it opens up a gateway into a whole area of discussion.
So you're kind of just highlighting why the Midrash says back to my garden, highlighting the different destruction, and like you said, even back to Adam and Eve time, how throughout these different experiences we've had, pleasant or unpleasant or turbulent, and the progression of our consciousness, thinking, that maybe Hashem is beyond us or, away from us. This is actually, his garden, his dwelling place, where he wants to be.
Right.
So as opposed to, it sounds like the Midrash comment of saying back to my garden, even though King Solomon kind of said, this is, Hashem, God is saying, this is my garden. We've had our different experiences where we've sinned or whatever you want to call, or however you want to describe it. But then the Midrash are saying, no, it's still here. This is where God wants us to be. We don't want to go we don't want to go focus on the afterlife or whatever, but really being, making this place a dwelling place. Exactly.
And in fact, the word garden is very specific because the garden has a connotation. What's a garden about? Garden
life growing.
It's also a place for extra pleasure. It has a connotation like you enjoy your home because you need a place to live, you need shelter. But a garden is a step beyond your home in a way. It's attached to your home, but it's a place where you go for real enjoyment and relaxation. When you can really just be yourself. You can just be you, relaxed in your garden. And so the idea that God says, my garden, it's a very big compliment for the importance of our world, of what its potential is to really be God's beautiful place.
I never really thought about what exactly a garden is, the purpose and everything to it. Well,
yeah,
because I'm thinking life, abundance, there's growth happening.
All of that's true as well. Yeah. So this is the famous garden, the Garden of Eden, but God is coming back, let's say in the time of sort of coming back. God is here all the time. Yeah. So we have to clarify. What we're talking about is more like a revelation of divine presence. Where is your focal point? What's the main place? God exists everywhere. There's no place devoid of God, but there's a place where God is more revealed and more the Shekhinah, the indwelling, the sort of more of a revelation.
Meaning one could sense that, be in that presence a lot more viscerally.
Right, exactly.
And so it's saying you don't have to leave this world to really experience that or retreat from this world.
Exactly. This is really one of the main ideas in Judaism, even though Judaism talks about afterlife and, the heavenly Gan Eden, Garden of Eden, so to speak, paradise. And it's true that our souls, this world, the way it is right now, is a very concealed place, and the soul, after a person's lifetime here in this world, does live a very good existence in the heavenly place. But that's not the ultimate goal in Judaism. That's the idea that Torah is teaching us, that the ultimate purpose is really to make this world a divine home, a divine, place that resonates.
I think hopefully as we learn more and more, that, my own understanding of make this world a dwelling place for God has expanded on its own. But will we be able to get a clear idea what exactly does that mean? Like you make this world a dwelling place for God. It's like I could see it as like you're doing a purposeful thing. You're helping other people with your work. You're doing something you love. You're healthy. All of that is kind of illuminating and making this place a dwelling, making your own self even a dwelling place for God. So like what more expansive definition could that mean, making this earth, the garden, the dwelling place?
Just think about the power of human beings. Think about how powerful we are. Unfortunately, we see a lot of the power in competition more now, where people have to compete against each other in order to bring out their strengths. But can you imagine what happens if people really pull their energies together to bring out the real goodness? This is basically what the Torah envisions through making the world God's garden, God's dwelling place. And it means that every aspect of life is there in its most beautiful form, but it's there to really reveal how it all works together for a greater good, a good that is truly good for everyone, not a greater good that leaves others behind, but a greater good that brings out the best for everyone.
I think I have a few other questions, but let's leave it to
I guess as we study, we can probably follow certain questions that come up. Okay, so what happened was, says the Midrash, that the main Shekhinah, the divine presence, was found below. Then through the sin of Eitz Hadas, that's the Hebrew, for the tree of knowledge, and the sins that followed afterwards that the Midrash enumerates, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, kind of departed. Nistalka means it departed, milamato l'mayla, from below to above, and it went gradually. First departed from kind of the physical earth and went to like a heavenly place, but still sort of close to earth, right?
Yeah.
But again, a spiritual. We're talking about a spiritual separation, not necessarily a physical one. And then with each subsequent big sin that mankind did in the beginning of our history, the Shekhinah removed itself to a higher level. In other words, further away from our consciousness.
That phrase, though, the departed, it kind of makes me question really what God is and the Shekhinah is, because if we say it departed, I almost feel like it's more so because of what our ancestors, or not ancestors, but what we did, that it's not that it departed, but it was like we almost couldn't see it as clearly.
You're right. I mean, that's basically what it really means. It means that for us, the Shekhinah is more removed. In truth, God's presence is here all the time. So it's like, imagine there's something that to be true, but it only exists in the deepest recesses of your mind, or almost subconscious truth. If it's a truth that is important to you, would be much better if that truth was in your conscious self, and if it influenced the way you felt about that, right? So that's what it means. If the Shekhinah is further away, it means we're separated from it in the way we think, the way we see.
Not actually, but in a way, like you said, how we.
It's kind of concealed from us. It's something that we struggle to see.
It's there, but it's not felt.
Right. It's like Adam and Eve, right? The Torah starts with the story of Adam and Eve. They knew that God's reality. It wasn't a question at all for them. But it was obvious. But for us, it's something that we have to think a lot about. We have to almost meditate on to remind ourselves of this. Okay, so all right, so after the Shekhinah kind of the Parda went up 7 levels, then came the work, the avoda service, lahori de tashkina milamayla lamata, to bring the Shekhinah back down, to bring it closer to us. Maschil be'Avraham, it started with Abraham, and afterwards the other forefathers, matriarchs, patriarchs, the righteous people who lived in those times, who through their incredible divine service, they actually brought the Shekhinah back down closer to us, closer to our reality. And finally, that culminated with Moses, who was the 7th in these generations, starting from Abraham. And there is a saying in the Midrash that he was the 7th, but there's something special about the 7th. The Hebrew term is kol hashvi'in chavivin, that the 7th are beloved. There's a certain favorite status about the 7th there, and we can get into that later. It's not the main focus here. But for example, we have, even in the days of the week, the 7th day is Shabbat. Yeah. There's something special about the 7th. And he was the one who finally, through his divine service, helped to bring the Shekhinah down into the world. And this is the idea of Basi Legani. I've come to my garden, to my bridal chamber, to my private place, to my beloved place. It's my the place I was before, because that's the idea. Why you started earlier, you talking about it. Why it's called my garden. Like the verse refers to it as I've come to my garden. It's implying it's something that I've known from before. Yeah. And not only was it a place that the Shekhinah was there, but the Icarus Shekhinah, which means the essence of the Shekhinah, the main focal point of the Shekhinah, was there, betachtonim, in the lowest realm, which is our realm, the physical realm. So that's the opening paragraph of this Mimer. Now let's continue, right? Yeah. Okay. Mavar kved kedushas Mimer chami admor, and the Rebbe said, when he said the Mimer, he said that my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, he explained and he summarizes the 10 chapters beforehand. So it's nice for us. We get a nice summary of that Mimer. That the main intention that God had, this is from the Midrash, that the source for this idea, the main intention that God had in creating the worlds. People ask, what's the reason for creation? Why are we here? And the Midrash tells us that the main intention was that God desired to have a dwelling place down in the lowest realm. So the biggest mystery of life is answered in those few short words. Why did God create us? Yeah. Why this whole thing? Why the entire universe? God wanted a dwelling place in the lowest realm.
So we kind of brought it up a little bit a few minutes ago. Like I was saying, how it'd be nice to have that, what that really means, more expansive. And like, we know, like with different things like meditation, somebody can get beyond this world to experience godliness, to experience God. Then it's almost like when you return from that experience, you're in such an elevated state, like you're no longer kind of rushing or doing anything. So what you're doing is, in a sense, making this a dwelling place for God, because you experience such an elevated experience that, there's no place to go. Kind of, it's such a, it's beyond senses or anything you can experience on this world. Is that different? Because but that requires, in a sense, retreating from this this physical world that we and share. Is the approach that it means, make this place a dwelling place different? Like you don't have to retreat in order to do that, but using the different physical objects.
Right. So let me comment on that a little bit. So meditation is an excellent tool for getting a higher awareness, achieving a higher awareness, and of course it exists. In fact, when we study a Mimer, one of the things we want to do with the Mimer afterwards, we want to think a lot about and meditate on ideas in it until they truly resonate with us, and they give us a lot of vitality in life. But it's important that meditation has from the perspective of the teachings of Chassidus, that it has a practical outcome, practical application here and now, because if a person goes only into the meditation and kind of
because then you don't want to even come back, like you just want to separate yourself and have those experiences. But at least how I've experienced, as you know, I practice meditation daily. I almost feel like if that were the result of a meditation, although you hear you can't do meditation right or wrong, I feel like that would be not the point of the meditation. It would be using it as like an escape.
Exactly.
Rather than using it as a tool to kind of, get all your emotion kinds of, not out of the way, but organized. So then when you come to the world and you have Shabbat, you do your career, your business affairs, all of that, you're approaching it more of in a state of like wholeness.
Exactly. You think about it. Meditation takes place more on the inside.
Yeah.
But God gave us a soul, mind, emotions, body, instinct. We're meant to use the entirety of our being for the higher purpose, and so use everything around us for that. That's why we're here. If the goal was only the spiritual, then we wouldn't have been necessarily brought into this level of existence. We could have remained spiritual.
It's not I think it also highlights the garden thing. It's not like we're in the backstage, just going through. We just have to survive through this, life. But it's the main stage.
Exactly. That's where it's meant to be.
Please continue somehow how the Rebbe summarized the previous 10 chapters in such a short.
Yeah. So let's see. So he had said that the main objective of God's objective was to create a dwelling place here for the Shekhinah. Now, how do you get there? How does it start? It starts with the commandment in the Torah, you shall make for me a mikdash. Mikdash means a sanctified, holy place, and I will dwell amongst them. So
them meaning the Jewish people.
The Jewish people are building the temple, that God will dwell amongst them by them building this mikdash, this holy temple. And the term is v'shachanti daika, which means that and I will dwell. Not just there will be some sort of divine presence, but God says I. And when you talk about I, you're talking about sort of the very essence of God, the most powerful aspect of God will be present there and revealed there. That the idea of a mikdash, the Rebbe said, was like a dwelling for a king. When you live somewhere, you live there with the entire being. B'chol atzmusa is the term, with the entirety of your being. Like, when you go somewhere, let's say
vacation.
You go do something. I don't know. You go get a drink. You're in this drive-through at Starbucks for a coffee. Would you say you're there with your entire being? You're passing through. You don't really. It's maybe if you're always very present, but for most people, you know what I mean. That you are. It's not where you want to stay for a long time, but your home is a place where you, quote unquote, feel at home.
Yeah. People
behave differently and feel differently when they're in the comfort of their own home versus other places. Mm-hmm. And this is the idea. We want to make a place that God can feel at home.
So he's not ever really distant to us. Like what it was saying at the first, so the Shekhinah never departed, but it always feels kind of at home, using the analogy.
Yeah, that in that place that we create, that we forge, that we illuminate, it's so beautiful and it's so integrated with godliness that you can feel godliness there. God is at home there.
As opposed to just in one place.
As opposed
maybe as opposed to just like in church or in synagogue or
yeah,
somewhere.
right.
It's like throughout the whole,
as
everywhere.
opposed to just being an abstract idea, as opposed to just being certain times in certain places. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're living all day in prayer. That's not what it means. Prayer is a specific thing we do for a purpose. It's something that encompasses
maintaining that state that you experience or reached in prayer throughout the whole day.
Exactly. So, and then it continues and says that same thing. This is what we just said is on a macro picture, the idea of God coming into the Mikdash, but also said, "V'shakanti b'socham, I will dwell amongst them." So there's really a personal aspect to this, and that is that through our own service, each individual. We think about the word betocham, which means I'll dwell amongst them, that God dwells within each and every one of us. In other words, the idea of the Mikdash, even before we have such a place, the first idea is to bring it into ourselves, to make ourselves, so to speak, a temple for God, a home for God. Yeah, it starts within. And now this analogy goes further, and he continued, and he said that this concept, you can see it also in the details, the specifics of the way the Mishkan, which was the first temple that the Jewish people built in the desert, the Sinai desert, that they were commanded to build after receiving the Torah, that how it was built. It was built with a lumber. The walls were made with beams of lumber that in Hebrew are called krashim. Krashim, it means like a beam. We'll read a little bit further and we'll discuss it. K'moshe Kasov, as it says in the verse in the Torah, V'asisas hakrashim la'mishkan atzei shitim amdim. You shall make beams for the Mishkan. That's the tabernacle in the desert. Atzei shitim amdim. Standing pillars or beams of acacia wood. In Hebrew, the term is atzei shitim. Eitz is wood. Shitim is acacia. So we're going to get to that in a second, the meaning of that. But first, we're going to focus on the word, the term for the beam in Hebrew is keresh. That what's interesting is he points out in the Mimer that keresh, the name for the beam, has the same letters as the word sheker. Now, you know what sheker means, right?
Foolishness.
Sheker means falsehood.
Falsehood.
False, yeah. So that's the other term we're going to come to in a second, which is sort of hinting to the falsehood of the world, the sheker ha'olam. V'ha'avodahi, and the work is, the task is, lahafoch, to transform. Turn our page here. As sheker ha'olam, the falsehood of the world, v'lasais mimenu, and to make from it, from the very falsehood of the world, kesher, which means a bond, a knot. The keresh, and a beam, shehu kli lelikus, which is a vessel for godliness. How so? By making the very temple, the mikdash, the holy place out of it. So let's think about it. It's such a fascinating idea. So basically what the Mimer was saying, that the beams of the Mishkan, the walls that were built, in Hebrew, the term in the Torah is keresh. But the Hebrew language is called the Holy Tongue. And according to the tradition of Judaism, the teachings of Judaism, this is the very language of creation. That's why the Torah is in this language. So the words in it are not just some sort of coincidence, but they actually are like a code. They're built like almost like mathematics is a code. So too the Hebrew language, the letters are each like building
gives you
blocks.
Hints kind of to other meanings of what it has.
So it's always interesting to see the root of a word, usually 3 letters, and to see what other associations it has. So in this case, the Hebrew word keresh, the 3 letters, if you rearrange them, and each letter is like a divine energy. If you rearrange the letters, it actually spells something negative, sheker, which means falsehood. So the Mimer says, our objective, what the Torah wants us to do, what God wants us to do, take the falsehood of the world. Because the world in its default state, what is falsehood? Falsehood.
What does it mean?
The idea means there's a false
like
veneer.
distractions?
Yeah, there's a false veneer. The fact that
So kind of like you would to turn the thing. It's almost like what do we say? Like in Italian, like the things that, depending on how you use it, can be used for good or bad. So it's to take that which is used for falsehood and turn it in.
Well, let's use an example. Business, okay? Earning a living, business. People want to be entrepreneurs, want to make a lot of money. Now, is that in and of itself? If the entire goal is simply I want to acquire a lot of money for myself, does that represent kind of the goodness or the truth of the world? Or does that represent something that is lacking? It's something lacking because, yes, it's a powerful force. There's a lot you can do. And yes, it's true that people benefit when a person is enterprising. A lot of people benefit. But it's still, there's good and bad mixed in because there's still a lot of selfishness mixed into it. You're not bringing out the ultimate best. Now, but on the other hand, if that same entrepreneur has that same drive, recognizes it as, there's this drive that comes from we call it the animal soul that wants to achieve, but knows how to channel it to bring out real goodness, then you're taking sort of the sheker, the falsehood of the world, and you are turning it into a tool for connection, for building a keresh, for building a temple for God, for bringing godliness into the world, and a kesher for connection to God. You can see how someone could do it. It's kind
of like that. What isn't there a saying by the sages that it's like the good inclination is strong and the evil inclination is stronger?
That's right.
Something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So you just have to use it in the good godliness and helping others and making this place the garden.
Exactly. So then what does that mean? Should you shun the world or the ways of the world? No. You shouldn't shun the world. You should utilize the world for its inner purpose. Bring out its best.
Rather than that the animal soul, rather than try and what's the word?
Fight it or separate
or
from
resist it or kind of destroy it, if that were possible.
Right.
Rather you utilize it for
the good. And the idea is, if God made it, it really does have a good to be brought out of it. That doesn't make things for for negative purposes, for a positive purpose. So we need to find that positive, and people are doing it more and more. You see, people are doing it. It's a beautiful thing. So you see how different apps that people are making that, yes, they can earn a living out of it, and God, it's good. Everybody should live well and make a lot of money, but at the same time, they're learning how to benefit other people through it, and it shouldn't all just be about themselves. And that's when people are most successful today. Yeah, when they do that. So that's just an example.
Does have other definitions than falsehood?
Pretty much clear, sheker, falsehood. Yeah, so it's amazing how that same thing. Now, what does it mean? It means that even the falsehood, it's false because it's in the wrong order, so to speak. It's you can say the priorities are not straight. It's not organized right. So the shin is first, and the kuf is next, and the resh is next. It results in sheker, which is falsehood. If you rearrange it and you put the order of priorities right, then you can get kesher, you can get keresh, you can get a beam, you can get something that builds instead of something that destroys. So, so that's the first way of how in our divine service, which means in our own work as individuals, we can make the world a dwelling place for God, and it starts with our own lives. And then he continues and says, and likewise in man's service, there is this idea of how to bring the divine presence, the Shekhinah within us, within each and every one of us. It's hinted in the next word, which is, remember, the beams are called atzei shitim. They're made of acacia wood. So just like keresh had its message, so the word shitim, which is the name of the wood, the type of wood, acacia. Also has, acacia in English, but in Hebrew, shitim also has a message, a beautiful message encoded in it. So the Mimer says that shitim is meloshen shtus, which means it's related to the word, which means foolishness. That's what you were referring to earlier. Foolishness. And so v'yesh shtus l'umazed, there is foolishness of the other side, which means the unholy. Mimer Azal, as our sages said, ein adam over avera ela im kein nichnas by ruach shtus. The sages said in the Talmud that a person will not sin unless some spirit of folly overcame them, foolishness. In other words, a person by default doesn't want to do a sin. It's harmful because it goes against your inner wisdom of your soul. But a person will only do so if they're overcome with foolishness. That's why usually people regret sin, unless they are pathological and down to very, but if they, and even then, but most people, unless, if the person is not in a very problematic psychological state, they will regret bad things that they've done because it's only a temporary foolishness that person is overcome with. And what is the service of man? The service of the human being is to transform the foolishness of the other side, of the unholy, and elevate it. And how do you do so? Yes, the key is shtus d'kedusha, which means the quote-unquote foolishness of holiness. Well, let's rephrase it. Holy foolishness. Holy foolishness, a holy folly, okay? So now it sounds a little funny because holiness doesn't sound like it should be foolish. I think, by the way, we'll finish this idea time-wise. But
it's a great like it's giving us a great summary and idea of what the whole discourse is about. Yeah, this is one of the key ideas in there. But by the end of it, we'll like it's saying beautiful things like turn the falsehood into what was it? Into connection, and now we're turning the foolishness into something like this. Will we learn different actions how to actually we're even going to have a bit of an example right now. In this second thing that we're learning about the foolishness, this is more like the tool, the method. The first one was like a general idea, the goal: take the falsehood and transform it, but it doesn't say how. Right now, this is actually a message of how do you, because the falsehood is basically the foolishness of this world. And you have to know what the falsehood or foolishness is in order to transform it. It's true, yes. But how do you transform it? You use, there's a saying from the Talmud that from the forest comes the handle for the axe. So if you want to be able to chop down a tree, you need wood as a handle for your axe, and you can chop the tree and make lumber. So sometimes the key to something is found within the thing itself. Actually, like now, vaccine comes, the cure is made before the disease. Yeah, and you utilize the disease for cure or something, or sometimes something negative can be used in a positive way. So in this case, you're taking, how do you overcome? See, the foolishness of the world is very tempting, right? It's everywhere. It's in every, it's billboards. It's appealing to you. It's all over the place. There's many distractions. It's in our phones that are pulling at us. About how can you overcome it? How can you be more powerful than it? The method is through holy foolishness. Now, what's that? So there's a story in the Talmud of one of the sages who the Talmud tells us the story of two sages. One sage, he would go to a wedding and he would do like a little show. He would dance holding a twig of hadas. Hadas is, we know it from Sukkot, from the lulav. Hadassim. So that's a myrtle branch. That's a very beautiful, nice smelling twig. And he would just act foolish. And he would kind of like dance holding it. There was another sage who would actually juggle with hadassim, so with myrtle branches.
in front of the bride and groom.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one of his colleagues thought that was kind of unbecoming of a great Torah scholar. We're talking about the leading Torah scholars of their time, and he's going to a wedding and he's juggling in front of the bride and groom.
Uh-huh.
Now, of course, the reason why he did that because Torah teaches us that a wedding is one of the holiest things.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you get a bride and groom, if it's done in a sanctified way, you're creating the child to bring godliness down into the world, like a new generation, a new home, a new place where you're going to embody the purpose of creation. And it's also symbolizing connection between Hashem and the Shekhinah. It's very, very great. So this sage obviously was doing the juggling. This is something that he felt. Now, after he passed away, this was Reb Zera who had first criticized him. After he passed away, at his funeral, the sages, who were all holy people, they saw that there was a pillar of fire that separated them from his grave, and they couldn't approach.
Like if we were standing around the grave, like the fire.
A pillar of fire.
Yeah.
This is told several times in the Talmud about very holy people. Now, what does it mean if it's physical that everybody could see, or just these great sages could see it? I'm not sure, but there was this pillar of fire, and Rabbi Zera saw this pillar of fire. And when he saw that, he realized that this sage was such a great tzaddik, but not all of the tzaddikim, not all of the great righteous sages merited such a incredible thing that showed how holy he was. He said this is because of his foolishness of Haneli Shtusei L'Sava, which means the venerable sage, the foolishness did him good. It did him well. In other words, he realized there was something very holy in that.
He was always celebrating. It was always in a lively state.
True, simcha, joy, but there's something more specific. That this is, and we're going to finish with this idea. This represents a service of God that reaches higher than reason, than the logical mind. Like of intelligence, of understanding, comprehension. In other words, when you study deeper in Torah, you come to realize there are things that you understand. There are things that are stupid, right? They're below understanding.
Yeah.
And then you have things that are l'mayla mitam v'das. They're above the reach of the human mind. Some things are now, it's because recognizing the human mind we're limited. We are a finite being. As smart as we are, we do have our limits. When a person behaves the way this sage did, he kind of acted, for him, it was a good foolishness. He was going out of his boundaries. He was celebrating with simcha, with joy. It was a holy foolishness. It was foolishness for a good cause. In other words, he was getting carried away with something good in a positive way. So the way to challenge and to overcome the voice or the triggers of the foolishness of the other side, is by behaving and acting in a way where you go a little above and beyond. Let's say if you're being friendly, you're being very friendly, charitable, very charitable, more than welcoming, very welcoming.
I feel like it's also applying towards like it brings up about a wedding.
Yeah.
But it seems like he was also kind of being holy, foolish, or however you would say it, towards even challenges of life. Like one of the other Rebbes had was famous for one of his quotes saying like, you see a challenge, don't go through it, just go beyond the challenge as if it's not there.
Right.
I feel like that's kind of like using foolishness in a holy way, like celebrating, going after the adversity with like a challenge kind of approach, which this could be looked at as foolish, but with a greater understanding, greater perspective. No, that's actually when you're best able to approach that challenge. When you're, holy, right.
You bring the best.
You're so kind of foolish,
right? That
it would, to somebody who doesn't understand, to be like, this is strange. But actually, in that state of play and that joyfulness, you have all your faculties, wiring at them.
Absolutely. Best. And it's so to put it maybe in other words, it's like to be passionate about these good things. Sometimes people
and
go
even the not so.
No, but I'm saying when you want to do the goodness, the holiness, that's what I'm talking about, the holy foolishness, to be passionate about it. Because sometimes people think when it comes to doing good, they'll do the letter of the law. I'll do what I need to do. If the Torah says I need to give charity, I'm going to give, it says recommends 10%, I give 10%, and I don't give a cent more. If I'm supposed to do this mitzvah, I'll do it, but in the minimum or just the limited way. And I have it all down pat. I have all my ducks in a row. But when you go above and beyond a little bit, you're passionate about it, you do extra, that's where the real beauty is. That's where you really shine. It's in the extra, right? It's in the, you probably can relate. You probably can relate to it from your experience as an athlete.
You get you also kind of, what you give, you receive in a sense. So the more enthusiasm you bring, the more you go beyond. It's almost like you receive that. Not saying like I'm going to give more because I'll receive more. Not in order to receive, but it happens to be that like just so because I'm giving more or doing beyond what's just said of whatever, it happens that actually we receive just as much, if not more.
Yes, for sure. Now, we're stopping in the middle of a paragraph, so I'm going to say that the next step, just so for next time, it goes into, the temple included within it sacrificial offerings, which a lot of people don't understand, right? People have a hard time relating to it. And we're going to see an amazing insight how that also is instructive to our personal service of God in a very interesting way. Yeah.
So far we discuss a little bit of what Basi Legani, I've come to my garden, my sister, my bride. That was written by, that was from Shir HaShirim, King Solomon said that, and then the Midrash commented on that. And then the Rebbe he's summarizing the previous 10 chapters. And how do we make this a dwelling place? How do we bring the Shekhinah back to his garden, to where it's also like a visceral visual experience of godliness? He was talking about the Mishkan
and consciousness,
Yeah, he's talking about just like in the when they were building the Mishkan and when they were traveling through the desert. They was talking about the the beams, or it was that you take in order to make this a dwelling place for God. We turn the foolishness into a connection, or the falsehood into connection, and we transform it.
So it's not like we're using falsehood, God forbid. We are, because I want to be clear, because it could be misunderstood, but we are transforming it. We we change it into something else. Something that was negative, we change it into something positive.
In the other way, the other part of creating this or making this a dwelling place, or returning it as a dwelling place, is by making foolishness into holy foolishness.
Well, not exactly. No. Kind of, you. How do you overcome a person? I'll always be set by everybody. People that want personal growth kind of often feel down because they feel like, I wanted to do this and I planned to do that, and then I can't believe I made this mistake again, or again I got stuck doing this thing that I regret
about it, like Winston Churchill.
In other words, how do you overcome the things that derail you and distract you?
With more
not with those things, but by putting your energies into the good area in a super enthusiastic way. By doing so, the foolishness won't even be an issue anymore, because everybody needs to be consumed in something. And when you're passionate about good things, the passions about foolish things, they just fall away. They become insignificant. They become unimportant to us. And that's how we override them, and we make them irrelevant. Yeah, it's amazing. So this is on the path of coming into, how do we get into God's garden? How do we bring God's garden down to us? And it was fun.